They told me to disappear before my sister's wedding so the family could save face. If you love her, you'll stay away, my mother said, placing the ivory invitation in my hand like a verdict. The problem? The groom is my direct boss, the man who stole my work, backed me into a corner, and tried to buy my silence with an NDA. I didn't disappear. I set a stage for them to disappear, right in the middle of the vows. My name is Tessa Whitlow. I am 29 years old, a senior compliance analyst at ArcLight Meridian Holdings, and I am currently sitting in a prison of beige grout and granite countertops. The kitchen in my childhood home in Westvale always smells the same on a Tuesday. Stale, cold coffee, and the sharp, antiseptic bite of lemon-scented floor cleaner. It's the smell of things being scrubbed away, hidden under a veneer of domestic hygiene. My mother is a fanatic about visible cleanliness. The kitchen itself is the heart of the house, which tells you everything you need to know about this family. It's vast, cold, and designed for show, not for living. The stainless steel refrigerator is a double-wide monolith that hums a low, judgmental drone. The recessed lighting is harsh, making the quartz island look less like a place for family breakfast and more like an operating table. Today, I am the subject on that table. The object of this family tribunal is resting on the island between us. It's an invitation, thick as cardstock, embossed with ivory pearls and silver calligraphy. My sister, Sienna, is marrying Graham Lockhart. Sienna, my younger sister, the designated ray of sunshine in the Whitlow family narrative, is getting married. She is marrying Graham Lockhart. Graham is not just any fiancé. He is the boy wonder CFO of ArcLight Meridian Holdings, the youngest in the company's history. He is also my boss. He is the man who built his keynote presentation at the last quarterly review on a risk analysis model I spent 18 months developing. He is the man who smiled at me and called my work solid before presenting it as his own. And he is, to use a term I've documented repeatedly in sealed digital folders, a thief. My father, a man whose spine seems to have been replaced by worried gelatin years ago, places a hand on my shoulder. The weight is familiar, a soft, pleading pressure. Tessa Bear, he murmurs, using a childhood name that feels like sandpaper against my skin. We just want a smooth day, no waves, for the family. I look at his hand. The nails are clean, the knuckles slightly swollen. He used to smell like sawdust and potential, back when his woodworking shop was still a dream and not a bankrupt liability. Now he just smells faintly of the peppermints he nervously chews. He and my mother are still leveraged to the hilt from that unlucky investment, as they call it. They see Graham not as a son-in-law, but as a bailout, a way to finally stop the whispers at the Westvale Country Club. My mother, however, does not plead. She watches me from across the island, her hands clasped, her blonde hair pulled into a tight, perfect chignon. She's the one who scheduled this ambush, summoning me from my city apartment for a family chat. "What your father means," she says, her voice as level as the granite, "is that your presence would be a complication, an unnecessary one." She pauses, letting the silence do the heavy lifting, a tactic she perfected decades ago. We all know the situation. At ArcLight, your absence would be the best thing for Graham's career, and by extension, for Sienna's future. A complication, that's what I am. I am the squeak in the floorboard, the crack in the foundation, the single red wine stain on the immaculate white carpet of their ambitions. I am the senior compliance analyst who filed an internal whistleblower complaint, discreetly, by the book, regarding fabricated expense reports and 3 shadow vendors in the supply chain. It wasn't even sophisticated. 3 vendors. Apex Logistics, Keystone Sourcing, and Meridian Global, all registered in Delaware within the same week. All 3 had P.O. boxes for addresses. All 3 charged 40% above market rate for components we could get from our legacy suppliers. And all 3 had their invoices fast-tracked, bypassing the standard compliance review, with a digital signature from the VP of Procurement, authorized by a CFO-level override, Graham's override. The money, millions of it, was siphoned into accounts that were then funneled into a shell entity called the Westvale Outreach Foundation, a foundation whose board members included my parents. My complaint, which laid this out with immutable data, was investigated and then summarily resolved by HR last month. The response was a masterpiece of corporate gaslighting. After a thorough review, we found your concerns, while understandable from a procedural perspective, stem from a misunderstanding of the vendor-client relationship in the new procurement paradigm. Paradigm, that was Graham's favorite word. It meant a structure I created to steal money. My own boss, the head of audit, a man I respected, had told me to let it go. "You're hitting a wall, Tessa," he'd said, not meeting my eyes. "A wall that gets people reassigned." He was right. 2 days later, I was moved off all active accounts and onto legacy data migration, a digital dungeon. And now, I am the complication who is expected to RSVP, regretfully. I slide the heavy cardstock toward me. The silver calligraphy glitters under the harsh lights. Piermont Plaza Hotel, Grand Ballroom, 7 o'clock. Of course, the Piermont. It's where ArcLight holds its annual shareholder gala. It's neutral territory, designed to impress, sterilized of personality. I can already picture the guest list. The invitation boasts 200 of their closest family and friends. I know for a fact that at least half of those guests will be ArcLight leadership, the board members, the VPs, the department heads, the very people who smiled at me in the glass elevators while my complaint was being quietly suffocated in a back room by the man they were about to celebrate. This isn't a wedding, it's a corporate coronation. My mother slides a second envelope across the island. This one is plain, white, standard business size, no calligraphy. "Graham's legal team drew this up," she says, as if discussing catering options. "They felt, and we agree, that it's time for you to seek opportunities elsewhere. This is a clean break. Tessa, a fresh start." I pull out the folded pages. It's not a wedding gift. It's a non-disclosure agreement, bundled with a severance package disguised as career transition compensation. I scan the key clauses, my analyst brain highlighting the restrictive, suffocating language. 12 months of complete silence regarding my employment, my projects, and any perceived financial irregularities. In exchange for $60,000, not even a full year's salary. It was an insult wrapped in a threat. It was the price they put on my silence, my principles, and the 18 months of work they had just stolen. It was enough to keep me quiet until the wedding was over and the merger Graham was pushing for was complete, but not enough to actually be a career transition. It was hush money, plain and simple. I refold the legal document, aligning the creases perfectly. My hands are steady. That's one thing they always hated. How steady my hands are. How I don't raise my voice. "And if I don't sign this?" I ask. My voice is quiet, not rising to the bait. I don't look at the NDA. I look at my mother. Her face, which Sienna inherited the soft curves of, tightens. The mask of the concerned suburban matriarch slips, revealing the cold strategist beneath. My father shifts, his hand falling from my shoulder. He's already retreating to a neutral corner, studying the grout lines on the floor as if they hold some fascinating secret. "Don't be difficult, Tessa," my mother warns, her voice low. "This isn't about the money. This is about Sienna's happiness." "Is it?" I counter, still quiet. "Or is it about Graham's liability, or yours?" She leans forward. The scent of her expensive, sharp perfume cuts through the smell of bleach. "I am going to say this only once," she whispers. "A blade of ice. Your sister is on the verge of a life we could only dream of. Graham is a good man, a successful man. He is giving her everything. He is giving us everything. Do not ruin this for her." "You were always so jealous," she hisses, the accusation finally surfacing. "Always in the corner with your books and your numbers, while she was the one people liked. This is her moment. He loves her, and you will not take this from her. You will not." She pushes the ivory invitation back toward me, the pearls on it looking like small, blind eyes. "If you really, truly love your sister, You will sign that paper, and you will disappear. The words hang in the sterile air. Disappear, a ghost, a problem scrubbed away like a coffee ring. The silence in the kitchen stretches. It's just the three of us, the central figures of the Whitlow family tragedy, the coward, the collaborator, and the complication. Perhaps I was jealous. Once, jealous that Sienna could move through the world with such easy, unthinking grace, jealous that she was never asked to be the sensible one, the difficult one, the one who had to check the math. But that feeling had burned away long ago, replaced by a cold, hard pity. I pick up the thick invitation. I fold it neatly in half, the silver letters cracking. I slide it into the side pocket of my leather tote, right next to the NDA I have no intention of signing. I zip the bag. The sound is loud, abrasive, final. I do love Sienna, I say, my voice clear and calm. But I also love the truth. My mother's eyes narrow. She opened the door for a negotiation, but I just handed her a declaration of war. I stand up. My chair makes no sound on the polished tile. I turn. My heels clicking precisely. I don't run. I don't slam the door. I walk down the hallway, past the gallery of framed photos where Sienna is always front and center, her smile bright and blinding, and my own face is always slightly out of focus, just behind her shoulder. I let myself out the front door. The Westvale sky has opened up. A thin, miserable drizzle that isn't heavy enough to wash anything clean. It just makes the world cold and damp. I pull the collar of my trench coat tight, walk to my car, and as the engine turns over, I check the time on the dashboard. 3 days until the wedding, the countdown has begun. Driving away from Westvale, the rhythmic thwack, thwack, thwack of the windshield wipers becomes a metronome, counting down the seconds I have left. The drizzle has turned into a committed, miserable rain, blurring the identical, oversized houses into watercolor smudges of beige and gray. This is the world that built me, and the world I have to dismantle. My family is a portrait, literally. There is a 10-foot stretch of wall in the main hallway of that house, a curated gallery dedicated to the idea of the Whitlows. In every photo, Sienna is the focal point. Sienna at her ballet recital, a tiny, perfect sylph in pink. Sienna winning prom queen, her smile wide and brilliantly white. Sienna graduating cum laude from her liberal arts college, degree in communications, arm draped around my father, in every shot. The lighting is perfect, the smiles are calibrated for maximum warmth, and the composition is flawless. I am in these photos, too. Usually on the edge, the awkward one in the back row, half obscured by someone else's shoulder. My smile is always a fraction too late, or a little too tight. My academic decathlon medals were never framed. My own graduation photo, magna cum laude in forensic accounting, is in a smaller frame, tucked away on a side table in the den, in the largest family portrait, the one taken 5 years ago at the country club. The small engraved brass plate under the frame reads, "The Whitlow family." My own nameplate, Tessa, has been crooked for as long as I can remember, and no one has ever bothered to straighten it. It feels less like an oversight and more like a statement. It was always this way. Sienna was destined for the stage. She had presence, sparkle. When she flubbed her lines in the school play, it was an endearing moment of artistic vulnerability. I was dry numbers. I was analytical. Severe. Too serious. When I won the state math competition, my father patted me on the head and said, "Well, someone's got to do the taxes, I guess." Sienna was cultivated for display. I was tolerated for my utility. But the utility of numbers is that they are absolute. They don't care about presence or sparkle. They just are. And the numbers that defined my parents' lives were written in red. The woodworking shop was my father's midlife dream, a way to reclaim some artisanal manhood. It was also a financial black hole. He had no business sense, no supply chain management, and a belief that quality would magically create profit. When it imploded, taking their savings and their parents' savings with it. It was never called bankruptcy. It was never failure. It was, and still is, referred to only as the unlucky investment. The shame of that failure coated our lives. It was the reason for the hushed, angry phone calls behind closed doors. It was the reason my mother's smile became brittle. It was the reason they started judging everyone by their bank accounts, desperate to climb back to a level of security they had never truly possessed. I learned the price of atmosphere early. It was at ArcLight, years before Graham. Back when I was just a junior analyst, I found a rounding error in a supplier's invoices. It was small, just fractions of a cent on thousands of transactions, but it was consistent, and it always favored the supplier. I traced it, documented it, and proved it was an algorithm, not an error. It was quiet, systematic theft. I presented my findings to my then manager. The supplier contract was terminated, but I wasn't praised. I was taken aside. "Tessa," my manager said, looking exhausted, "you understand this supplier was a personal friend of our VP? You've made things uncomfortable. You're ruining the team atmosphere." When I mentioned it at home, hoping for some validation, my mother's reaction was identical. "Why do you always have to dig?" she'd asked, exasperated. "Can't you just let things be? You're making people dislike you." I learned my lesson, not the one they intended. I learned that atmosphere is the word people use to protect a comfortable lie. I learned that digging is what they call doing my job. And I learned to stop showing people my work before it was complete and irrefutable. So when Sienna, in all her radiant, naive glory, started dating Graham Lockhart, I saw the exact moment the unlucky investment found its miracle cure. My parents were giddy. He wasn't a person. He was an asset. He was the young, brilliant CFO. He was golf at the country club. He was a new line of credit. He was, in my mother's breathless words at a family dinner, a life-changing opportunity. I just smiled. By then, I was no longer a junior analyst. I was senior compliance, and I had my own set of keys. I knew how to use the off-hours copy machines, the ones in the sub-basement that didn't log user IDs to a central server. While my family was fawning over Graham at brunches, I was spending my nights documenting his genius. I photocopied every invoice from Apex, Keystone, and Meridian. I cross-referenced the wire transfer authorizations. I printed the digital logs of his CFO-level overrides. I secured the articles of incorporation for the Westvale Outreach Foundation, the ones listing my parents as ecstatic, non-compensated board members. I smiled. I put the originals in a bank's safe deposit box, and I uploaded the scanned copies to a server that was not connected to ArcLight. My home, or my name, I didn't say a word. I just gathered the facts. The engagement dinner was a masterclass in willful blindness. It was at Vale and Vine, a restaurant with $1,000 bottles of wine and waiters who never let your water glass get half empty. My mother raised a champagne flute, her eyes sparkling with unshed, joyful tears. "To Graham," she toasted, her voice thick with genuine adoration, "who has not only captured our Sienna's heart, but who has a truly gifted, almost heaven-sent mind for finance. We are so blessed." I looked at my own glass of champagne. The bubbles rose and burst, like tiny disappearing truths. I thought of the flowchart I had on my laptop. The one that showed Graham's heaven-sent mind had created a system to siphon $4.8 million in 18 months. Genius. They chose the Piermont Plaza Hotel for the reception. Sienna was ecstatic. She'd spread the glossy brochures on the living room floor, a sea of cream and gold. "Look, Tess," she'd squealed, pointing to a photo of the grand ballroom. "Look at those chandeliers and the lighting. It's going to be so beautiful for the photos." I looked at the photos. I saw something else. I saw a commercial-grade, fully integrated AV system. I saw ceiling-mounted projectors, recessed JBL speakers, and a central control booth with fiber optic network ports. I saw multiple high-amperage electrical circuits, mapped and labeled on a public schematic available on the hotel's event planning website. They had chosen their stage for its beauty. I had chosen it for its infrastructure. The memory of that day in the kitchen, the ticking clock of my departure, blends into a more recent one, a phone call. Just last week. Sienna. Her voice was light, bubbling with pre-wedding panic about flower arrangements and seating charts, and then the inevitable pivot. "Hey, Tess." Her voice dropped, losing its sparkle, replaced by a thin, nervous wheedling, the voice she used when she wanted me to co-sign her first car loan. "About the wedding, I know you and Graham. Work stuff. It's so boring." A nervous laugh. "But just promise me, okay? It's my one day. Don't do anything weird." Weird. The family code word for honest, the word they used when I wouldn't lie to a creditor about when my father's check would be in the mail, the word they used when I refused to pretend the unlucky investment was anything but a failure. "Don't make it awkward, sis, please, for me." I had stood in my own silent apartment, looking out over the city skyline, a landscape of hard glass and concrete facts. I could hear the lie she wanted. "Of course. Sienna, it's your day. I wouldn't dream of it. It was so easy. Just one little lie to maintain the atmosphere." I didn't say it. "I'll see you at the church. Sienna," I'd said, my voice flat. There was a pause, a cold, disappointed silence. "Okay, Tess," she'd finally whispered. "Just, please." She hung up. I opened my laptop. I looked at the AV schematics for the Piermont Plaza Grand Ballroom. I looked at the timeline I had built, a minute-by-minute script for the reception. Her plea wasn't a request. It was a confirmation. They were all nervous. They all knew, on some level, that the foundation of their perfect day was built on sand, on theft, on my silence. I highlighted the first item on my checklist. Secure independent AV technician. I nodded to my empty apartment. The timeline was set. The 39th floor of the ArcLight Meridian building is a terrarium for sharks. It's all floor-to-ceiling glass, brushed steel, and an aggressive recycled silence. The air conditioning is kept at a frigid 68 degrees, a temperature designed to keep suits from wrinkling and minds from wandering. You don't chat on the 39th floor. You network. You don't talk. You align. I was sitting at my terminal in the legacy data migration bullpen, a corporate gulag of gray cubicles tucked behind the elevator bank, when I watched Graham Lockhart seal his promotion. He was in the Horizon boardroom, the largest one, all glass walls facing the city. He was a performance artist. He commanded the room, pacing in front of a 90-inch screen, his suit a perfect shark gray. He was all confident smiles, energetic gestures, and passionate assertions about future-proofing our financial ecosystems, and on the screen, in ArcLight's crisp blue and white branding, was my work. It was my risk analysis model for supply chain vulnerabilities. It was the predictive algorithm I had spent a year building, the one that cross-referenced geopolitical instability, shipping lane congestion, and raw material price fluctuations. He had taken the entire methodology, rebranded it as the Lockhart Predictive Index, and was now presenting it to the entire executive board as his own flagship achievement. He didn't just steal the data, he stole the language. He used my phrases: procedural friction, stress testing the value chain, data-driven foresight. I watched his mouth form my words I had written in a dry, 80-page internal white paper. The board was eating it up. I could see old Mannheim, our CEO, nodding, his face lit with the kind of paternal pride he reserved for high-performing assets. I felt a cold, sterile numbness. It wasn't even anger, not yet. It was the feeling of being methodically erased. I was a ghost at my own desk, watching a man get a standing ovation for my soul. An hour later, the email from HR arrived. Subject: professional alignment and forward pathways. It was a digital execution, signed by a VP I'd never met. It informed me that, in light of the new strategic focus, Graham's new focus, My skill set was being redeployed. I was being permanently reassigned to the legacy data project. It was a career coffin. The final paragraph was a masterwork of passive-aggressive threat. ArcLight values a professional and collaborative atmosphere. We trust you will continue to uphold these standards and focus on your new responsibilities with diligence. We discourage internal friction and remind you of the pathways available through HR should you feel misaligned with your role. Misaligned. I wasn't misaligned. I was right. We discourage internal friction. That was a direct order. It was the corporate equivalent of shut up. Graham stole my intellectual property to get his applause, and this was the follow-up. HR burying me in a digital tomb to make sure I couldn't complain about it. This theft, the one everyone could see, was just the cover for the real one. The presentation was an arrogant flourish. The real crime was buried in the ledgers. I pulled up the file I called Westvale. It was the report I'd submitted and HR had resolved. My hands didn't shake. I just read the facts again, grounding myself in them. 3 new vendors: Apex Logistics, Keystone Sourcing, Meridian Global, all added in the last fiscal year, all charging rates that were, on average, 38.5% higher than our established, long-term suppliers for identical components, all with addresses that were just P.O. boxes in Wilmington, Delaware. The contracts were sloppy, clearly rushed. They had been signed by Richard Pace, the VP of Procurement, a man whose primary skills were golf and agreeing with Graham. But Pace didn't have the authority to approve expenditures of this size without oversight. Every single purchase order had a secondary digital sign-off, a CFO override, Graham's signature, present and accounted for on every single inflated invoice. $4.8 million. That's what I'd tallied so far. Siphoned, not stolen. Siphoning is quieter. It's a systemic bleed, not a smash and grab. And where did it bleed? That took me 3 weeks of off-hours digging. The payment routing was clever, bouncing through 2 intermediary clearinghouses, but they all terminated in the same place, a high-yield savings account belonging to a nonprofit organization, the Westvale Outreach Foundation. A foundation with no public footprint, no charity work, no website, a foundation whose entire purpose, it seemed, was to exist as a financial receptacle. I had the incorporation documents. I knew who was on the board. And I had just seen the catering deposit for the Piermont Plaza. I'd found it on the shared server for wedding planning that Sienna had giddily added me to. The hotel required a $50,000 deposit. Sienna didn't have that kind of money. My parents certainly didn't. The deposit had been paid, not by Graham Lockhart, but via a wire transfer from the Westvale Outreach Foundation, classified as a promotional event sponsorship. He wasn't just stealing from the company. He was using the stolen money to pay for the wedding. He was making my parents complicit in their own financial rescue, tying them to his crime with a golden ribbon. I closed the HR email. I closed the vendor report. My path was clear. Graham had overplayed his hand. He thought the HR email would silence me. He thought the family pressure would break me. He mistook my silence for submission. There was one channel left, the one I had respected, the one I had tried to use. Mark Theron, the head of audit, my boss's boss, a man who built his entire personality around the concepts of integrity and the book. He was ex-FBI, had a spine of steel, and allegedly hated Graham's new money flash. He was my last, best hope for an internal resolution. I didn't email him. I walked to his assistant's desk. "I need 15 minutes with Mark," I said. "It's urgent. A compliance red flag." She gave me a slot at 4:00 p.m. Room, Catalyst. I went back to my desk. I printed a new set of the core documents. The 3 vendor contracts, the POs with Graham's override, and the wire transfer confirmation from the foundation to the Piermont. I didn't use the network printer. I used the old standalone copier in the records room, the one that wasn't networked, on every single page. I used my personal stamp to emboss a watermark. Faint but unmissable. Confidential. T. Whitlow. Compliance file 774B. It wouldn't stop them from being copied. but it would prove where they came from. I sealed the watermarked copies in a manila envelope. The originals, the ones I'd copied in the basement weeks ago, were in a safe deposit box 2 blocks away. The digital-only files, the server logs, the IP traces for the vendor registrations, the audio file of Pace bragging at the Christmas party about his bulletproof new system were on an encrypted drive in the same box. I wasn't stupid. At 3:58 p.m., I walked to the Catalyst conference room. It was another glass box, smaller than the Horizon room, designed for focused interactions. I pushed open the heavy glass door. Mark Theron wasn't there. Graham Lockhart was. He was sitting at the far end of the polished mahogany table, alone. He wasn't smiling. He was looking at his phone, the picture of a busy, important man. He didn't look up immediately. He made me wait, forcing me to walk the full length of the room, my footsteps echoing in the small space. He'd intercepted me. Theron, the man of integrity, had seen the meeting request, seen my name, and had immediately forwarded it to the man I was trying to report. My last internal pathway was a trap. "Tessa," he said, finally looking up. He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Close the door." I didn't sit. I remained standing, clutching the manila envelope. "Where's Mark?" "Mark's handling a fire," Graham said smoothly, steepling his fingers. "He asked me to step in. He knows we're connected. He thought I might be able to resolve this more delicately." Resolve. The word my mother had used. The word HR had used. The corporate word for bury. "What is it you think you're resolving, Graham?" He finally smiled. It was the same polished, high-performance smile he'd used with the board. It didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were cold, assessing, like a reptile gauging the distance to its prey. "I know you're unhappy, Tessa," he said, his voice a low, reasonable purr. "I saw the presentation this morning. Look, that was just a high-level summary. I was going to name you as a core contributor in the follow-up memo. You just misunderstood the context." "I don't misunderstand context, Graham. I read logs. I read ledgers." His smile twitched. The pretense of misunderstanding evaporated. His gaze hardened. "You're smart, Tessa. Too smart for your own good. You're like a dog with a bone. You just can't let go. Can you? Even when it's going to get you put down." He reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a familiar document. A plain, white, standard business envelope. He slid it across the table. It stopped inches from my hand. It was the same NDA my mother had given me, or a copy of it. "Your mother told me you were hesitant," he said. "I'm here to unhesitate you. 60,000. A clean break. You walk away. You keep your mouth shut, and you find a nice, quiet job at a smaller firm where you can count beans to your heart's content. And in return, your sister gets to have a beautiful, uncomplicated wedding." He leaned forward, dropping the friendly boss facade. Now he was just the shark. "We are family, Tessa. In 3 days, we will be brother and sister. This," he tapped the envelope, "is me protecting our family. It's me protecting Sienna. It's me protecting your parents from the kind of scrutiny they can't afford. Think about what a federal investigation does to people on the board of a charitable foundation. Think about your father's health, his heart." The room was silent. The air conditioning hummed. This was the real him. Not the charismatic leader, but the back-alley threat. He would use my sister's happiness, my father's health, my mother's desperation, all of it, as a shield. "So this is what family means?" I asked, my voice as cold as the room. "It means silence? It means watching you steal and nodding along?" He stood up, towering over me. He was taller than I remembered, or maybe he just seemed that way when he was threatening me. He placed his palms flat on the table. "No, Tessa," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Family means trust. It means you trust that I know what's best. It means you trust that I'm handling things. It means you trust that this is all for the greater good. And it means I trust you not to burn this all to the ground, including yourself." I looked at the envelope. I looked at his cold, dead eyes. I looked at the glass walls, at the 39th floor world he had built, and I felt the last shred of my professionalism fall away. I didn't pick up his NDA. I left it on the table. "I understand," I said. "Good. Sign it. Have it on my desk by end of day. And Tessa, don't come to the wedding." I turned and walked out. I didn't say another word. I walked through the silent, freezing cold office, past the Horizon room, past Theron's empty office, and back to my cubicle in the gulag. I sat down. My heart was a cold, hard stone in my chest. Family means trust. Don't come to the wedding. I pulled my bag onto my lap. I took out a pen, and I took out a different folder, one I had prepared this morning, just in case. It wasn't an NDA. It was Form TCR. Tip, complaint, or referral. The official whistleblower submission portal for the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. It was already filled out. It just needed a final signature on the affidavit. I uncapped my pen. The click was the loudest sound in the office. I signed it, but it wasn't his NDA. My signature on the Form TCR affidavit was a thin, angry line of black ink, back at my gray cubicle, in the sterile silence of the 39th floor. I felt the confrontation with Graham settle over me, not as fear, but as a cold, clarifying fuel. He thought he had given me an ultimatum. He had given me a starting pistol. The SEC's whistleblower portal is an ugly government-issue interface, all gray boxes and tiny fonts, designed to be functional, not friendly. It promises anonymity, but I wasn't relying on a promise. I was submitting through a heavily encrypted, anonymized network, bouncing my signal through 3 different countries before it hit the server. This wasn't just a tip. It was a full, pre-packaged case. I didn't just submit the ledgers. I submitted my complete, 80-page forensic analysis. I attached the flowcharts showing the money moving from ArcLight, through the Delaware P.O. boxes, into the intermediary accounts, and finally landing in the Westvale Outreach Foundation. I attached the vendor contracts, the digital logs of Graham's overrides, and the foundation's incorporation papers listing my parents. I was handing them the needle and pointing directly to the vein. I hit submit. A small box popped up. "Your complaint has been received. TCR 10249583. I screenshotted the number and shut the browser. That was the official channel. Now for the insurance. I had 2 packages, both digital, both identical copies of everything I had just sent to the SEC, plus a narrative summary I'd written in plain, brutal English. The first package was a password-protected zip file. I sent it to the secure client portal of a private attorney in a different state, one who specialized in corporate malfeasance and retaliation suits. I had retained her 2 weeks ago under a different name, paying her retainer in cash. The file was just data. The password would be delivered via a different channel if I failed to check in. The second package was the dead man's switch. It was an email, drafted and sitting in a secure timed send folder. The recipient was not a lawyer. It was an independent, famously aggressive PR firm that had built its reputation on breaking corporate scandal stories wide open. The email was scheduled to send at 7:05 p.m. on Saturday, exactly 5 minutes after the wedding vows were supposed to start. If I did nothing, that email would go out, and the story would explode across the financial news wires by Monday morning, taking down ArcLight stock, Graham, my parents, and by extension, me. My only way to stop it was to manually access the server from my phone with a complex series of passkeys and cancel the send order after 7 p.m. and before 7:05 p.m. It was a 5-minute window, a window that required me to be conscious, not in custody, and in control. With the digital trap set, I moved on to the physical one, the Piermont Plaza. I couldn't use the hotel's in-house AV team. They were contracted by my parents, paid for by Graham, and would be loyal to him. I needed my own operator, my own hardware. I found him online, a freelance technical director named Milo, who specialized in high-stakes corporate events where redundancy is everything. I contacted him from a burner email, posing as the high-strung, detail-obsessed sister of the bride, I explained that I was preparing a deeply personal surprise slideshow for my sister and that the groom's basic slideshow couldn't be trusted. I said I was terrified the hotel's system would fail. I need a complete backup projection package, I wrote, using his own website's terminology. A dedicated laptop, a high-speed media server, and a direct patch into the grand ballroom's main projector and audio system. It needs to be independent of the house system until the moment it goes live. He replied in an hour, "That's a redundant patch setup. Expensive. The hotel charges a massive fee to let a third-party vendor patch in." "I'll pay your fee in cash," I replied, "and I'll handle the hotel. Just tell me what you need." I already had the Piermont's AV schematics. I knew exactly which panel to patch into. I scheduled a venue walkthrough with the hotel's event manager, pretending to be checking on floral delivery routes. While she was distracted by a phone call, I took high-resolution photos of the AV booth, the patch bay, and the serial numbers on the Crestron control panel. I sent them to Milo. His response? "Easy. I'll be a guest. My gear will be in a rolling Pelican case. I'll need 10 minutes alone in the booth before the reception starts." "You'll have it," I wrote back. Now I needed the final, undeniable proof. The link between the stolen money and the wedding itself. The catering deposit was good, but I needed something more personal, more brutal. Sienna had been flashing her engagement ring for 6 months, a 3-carat cushion-cut diamond that was obscenely large and completely out of character for Graham, who was usually more discreet about his wealth. Sienna had bragged it was from de Groot's, the oldest and most exclusive jeweler in the city. I went to de Groot's the next day. I didn't go as myself. I went as Ashley, Sienna's flustered and disorganized personal assistant, tasked with handling her insurance paperwork. The jeweler, a man in a perfectly tailored suit, was wary until I provided Sienna's full name, Graham's name, and the exact date of their engagement. "Ah, yes, Ms. Whitlow's ring. A stunning piece," he said. "How can I help?" "I am so sorry," I gushed, playing the part. "We're trying to get the ring insured before the wedding, and I've lost the final appraisal and the payment receipt. Could you possibly print a copy for me?" He sighed, annoyed by my incompetence, but obliged. He tapped at his computer. A printer behind him hummed. He handed me the folder. The appraisal and the itemized receipt. I thanked him profusely and left. I didn't open the folder until I was back in my car. There it was. 1 custom platinum cushion-cut engagement ring. Total, $145,000 Hausredab. And at the bottom, paid in full, wire transfer, payer, the Westvale Outreach Foundation. He hadn't just used the stolen money for the party. He'd used it to buy the very symbol of his commitment. I needed one last piece, the signature. I had the digital signature on the foundation's incorporation documents, but I needed a physical, verifiable match to my parents. I drove to Westvale, using the excuse of picking up some old tax documents I'd stored in the attic. My mother was out. My father was in the den, watching golf, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He seemed smaller, grayer. He barely registered my presence. "In the office, I think," he muttered. In his office, on the desk, was a stack of mail and a checkbook, the Westvale Outreach Foundation checkbook. He wasn't even hiding it. It was just there, open. The check register showed the payment to de Groot's. It showed the payment to the Piermont, and it showed a payment for a pre-wedding celebration dinner at Vale and Vine. My father had signed the check. I took out my phone. I photographed the check register. I photographed the signature. I photographed the checkbook itself. I used a forensic scanning app that captures high-resolution detail and, crucially, embeds all available metadata. Time, 3:04 p.m. Location, 415 Crestview Drive, Westvale, geotagged. I even captured the log from the parking lot camera at de Groot's, which I'd requested from building security, claiming I'd lost an earring. The log showed my car, my license plate, entering at 11:52 a.m. and leaving at 12:04 p.m., corroborating the timeline of my visit to the jeweler. I had the crime. I had the proof. I had the delivery system. As I was walking out of my parents' house, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My heart stopped. I expected it to be Graham, or my mother, with another threat. I opened it. It was one sentence. Stay the course. Don't engage early. I didn't recognize the number, but I didn't have to. The syntax, the brevity, the cold command. It was Mark Theron, the head of audit. He hadn't betrayed me to Graham. Graham must have intercepted the meeting request himself. Theron, the ex-FBI man, the man of integrity, was trapped. He knew I was right. He knew Graham was dirty, but he was bound by internal procedure, unable to move until the board, or the SEC, forced his hand. His text wasn't a threat. It was a warning. It was a quiet, desperate, off-the-books way of telling me, "You are right. I can't help you, but don't you dare stop." He had just given me the last piece of validation I needed. I had one final purchase to make. Sienna, in her wedding planning mania, had emailed everyone a link to the exact silk flower bouquet she had chosen. "So the bridesmaids' bouquets can be a perfect echo of mine," she'd written. I ordered an identical one, paying for rush delivery. It arrived on Thursday. It was a heavy, dense ball of silk peonies and fake hydrangeas. I spent an hour in my apartment, a needle and thread in hand, carefully unstitching the base. I took a micro lavalier microphone, the kind actors wear on Broadway, with a tiny, powerful transmitter. I nested the microphone deep within the silk petals, running the hair-thin wire down the handle. I secured the transmitter in the core of the plastic stem, wrapping it in florist's tape. I tested it. The fidelity was perfect. It could pick up a whisper at 3 feet. It was my something borrowed. A perfect echo, indeed. Finally, I sat at my laptop. I created a new file. It wasn't a video. It was a presentation, built in a program used for trial exhibits. Each piece of evidence was a slide. The flowcharts, the invoices, the check from the foundation to the jeweler, side by side with my father's signature from the checkbook, the bank transfer to the Piermont, the NDA. Graham had offered me, and finally the audio file of my father's voice from a voicemail he'd left me last week. "Tessa, just be reasonable. This is our one chance." I saved the entire presentation, set to advance automatically every 5 seconds, as a single, self-playing video file. I named it, For Vows Final, MP4. It looked exactly like the slideshow of childhood photos Sienna had probably asked for. I uploaded the file to Milo's media server. I set the countdown timer on my phone. 48 hours to go. The day of the wedding dawns cold and impeccably bright, a brittle, high-definition Saturday. The traps, digital and psychological, are all set. All I have to do is wait for the prey to walk into them. They do not disappoint. The first call comes at 11:00 a.m. as I'm lacing my severe, practical black leather boots. My phone buzzes on the nightstand, showing Mother. I let it ring 3 times, then answer. Tessa. Her voice is not warm. It's managerial. She's an event planner coordinating a difficult vendor. "You have your invitation card, correct? The physical one." "Yes, I have it." "Good. Security at the Piermont is very tight. Graham's request. You'll need it to get past the gate. And Tessa?" A strategic pause. "Your father and I were thinking, the main ballroom is so crowded. We've arranged a seat for you in the west atrium. It has a lovely view of the proceedings, a live feed on a screen. It's much more private." I stare at my reflection in the mirror. I am dressed in a black, sharply tailored suit. My hair is pulled back in a severe, tight knot. I look less like a guest and more like an executioner, or perhaps, in their minds, a hazardous material. "A live feed," I repeat, my voice flat. They are not just excluding me. They are putting me in a digital cage, a timeout room with a television. "It's for the best, dear. This way. You're still part of it. But there's no awkwardness. For Sienna. You understand. Just don't come into the main ballroom, okay? We'll see you at the cocktail hour. Maybe." Click. She hangs up before I can respond. Yes, Mother, I whisper to the deadline. I won't go to the main ballroom. I slide my phone into the deep inner pocket of my suit jacket. The second contact comes an hour later. A text message. Graham. Tessa, I'm assuming your silence since our chat means you finally decided to make the smart choice. I'm glad. This is what's best for the family. For Sienna. She's so happy today. Don't ruin that. Just stay quiet. Enjoy the free champagne from a distance, and we can all move on. As a show of good faith, I'm still willing to write that recommendation letter for you. We can put this all behind us. He's so arrogant. He can't help himself. He thinks he's won. He thinks he's bought my silence with a non-existent severance package and a vague threat. He's now offering me a treat for being a good dog. The bait is too perfect to resist. I text back, a letter of recommendation would be very helpful. Graham, thank you. Could you email that to me now? Just so I have it for my records. I'd appreciate it. I count the seconds. He won't be able to resist the final flex of power, the act of benevolent, dismissive control. Ping. My email inbox lights up. Subject. Recommendation. T. Whitlow. To whom it may concern, Tessa Whitlow is a diligent and focused analyst. While her tenure at ArcLight is concluding, she has demonstrated a capacity for in-depth data review. We wish her the best in her future endeavors. Sent from my iPhone, Graham Lockhart, CFO, ArcLight Meridian Holdings. It's condescending, it's weak, but that's not what I'm looking for. I open the email on my laptop. I view the original source, and there, attached to the header, is his full, verified digital signature certificate, the one tied to his corporate account, the one that proves, cryptographically, that this email came from him and no one else. I extract the certificate file. I drag it into the evidence folder for my presentation, placing it right next to the scan of the NDA he'd offered, the final digital fingerprint. Thank you, Graham. You just confirmed the offer. I arrive at the Piermont Plaza at 4:30 p.m. The lobby is a frantic ballet of black tie and satin, the air thick with perfume and the sound of nervous laughter. I am, as I predicted, invisible. I am a woman in a black suit with a severe expression. I am not a guest to be greeted. I am a professional to be avoided. I am the hotel manager, the event lawyer, the auditor. I am a ghost in their machine. As I'm crossing the marble expanse toward the service elevators, a hand grabs my elbow. Tessa. It's Richard Pace, the VP of Procurement. His face is pale. His tuxedo collar looks too tight, and he has a sheen of terrified sweat on his forehead. Richard, I say, not stopping. He almost has to jog to keep up. Listen, he whispers, his eyes darting around the lobby. I just wanted to say, I don't know what you think you know about the vendors, Apex, Keystone. I was just signing what Graham told me to sign. He said it was a new paradigm, a preferred partner initiative. I didn't know anything else. I'm just a guy doing my job. He's trying to build an alibi. He smells the smoke. He's trying to find a lifeboat. I have no idea what you're talking about. Richard, I say, my voice as cold and hard as the marble floor. I'm here for my sister's wedding. I pull my arm from his grasp. He stops, looking stunned and even more terrified. As he stumbles away, I check the guest folder on my phone. Milo, my technician, had already hacked the hotel's security network. In the folder is a saved clip from the service elevator camera. Time-stamped 9:05 a.m. It shows Richard Pace, not in a tuxedo, but in a golf shirt, pulling a rolling briefcase and carrying a heavy, bank-logoed document bag into the elevator, the one that goes to the penthouse suites, where Graham has his dressing room. He wasn't bringing a wedding gift. He was moving files. Or cash. Got it. I'm almost at the service corridor when my phone buzzes again. A different tone. A picture message. From Sienna. I open it, and my breath catches. It's not a text. It's a selfie from her bridal suite. She's in the full gown, a mountain of white lace and tulle. The veil is on. Her makeup is perfect, and her eyes are bright, shining, and utterly, incandescently happy. She looks beautiful. She looks innocent. The caption beneath it just says, "It's finally happening. I'm so happy I could cry. See you soon. I hope. XOXO." This is the hard part. This is the human shield my parents and Graham have been cowering behind. My finger hovers over the screen. This will break her. This will shatter that happiness into a million pieces. For a single, agonizing second. I hesitate. The dead man's switch is still active. I could stop it. I could let her have this lie. But the lie is the poison. The happiness is funded by the crime. The ring on her finger was bought with stolen money. My love for her can't be a get-out-of-jail-free card for their corruption. To let her walk down that aisle would be to make her an unknowing accomplice, to tether her life to a fraud. I type and delete. You look beautiful. It's a lie. It's participating. I type and delete. We need to talk. It's too late for that. I finally settle on the only truth I can offer her. Just be happy. Sienna. I send it. It feels like a eulogy. One more text. My father. Tessa. Your mother says you're in the atrium. We saved your seat. Row 8. Aisle. See you after. Dad. He's the weak one, the pleader. He's trying to normalize it, to pretend this is all just a minor family disagreement, that I'm just in the corner for a timeout. I open my phone's gallery. I find the high-resolution photo I took during my walkthrough, the complete AV schematic and seating chart for the grand ballroom. I text him the image, nothing else. A few seconds later, his reply. I don't answer. I'm not in row 8, Dad. I'm in the control booth. You're sitting in the blast radius. I walk down the carpeted, soundless service hall. I find the door marked AV Control, Ballroom. I use the keycard Milo had acquired for me. The room is dark, lit only by the glow of 24 small green and red lights on the racks of equipment. Milo is there, a black polo shirt, black slacks, a headset around his neck. He looks like he belongs. You're late, he murmurs, not looking up from his media server. The house AV guy just ran his final check. He's gone for a smoke. Their childhood memories slideshow is cued and looped. And us? We're patched in, Milo says. He points to his laptop. Your file, for Vow's final, MP4 is queued. I'm on a bypass loop. When you give the word, I hit one key. My feed overrides theirs, audio and visual. It's a hard patch. They can't cut it from the floor. They'd have to physically breach this room and pull the cables. He finally looks at me, his eyes calm and assessing. I'm getting paid a lot for this, lady, so I'll ask one time. You are 100% sure on the timing? This isn't a maybe. Once this file plays, you can't unplay it. This isn't a joke. I'm sure, I say. The soundproof glass in front of me looks down over the entire ballroom. It's a sea of black tie and flowers. I can see the front row. My parents. The ArcLight board members. Not until the keyword, I say. He has to say it. Keyword? For richer, for poorer. Wait until he finishes the phrase. Milo raises an eyebrow. Poetic and ironic, I'm guessing. Your funeral? Or his? He nods and puts his headset on, monitoring the room feed. I stand by the glass, invisible, looking down. The prelude music begins. A string quartet playing something light and hopeful. It's faint through the thick glass. My heart isn't racing. It's steady. It's a heavy, cold drum. A metronome counting down. I feel my pulse in my throat. It's not fear. It's focus. It is the absolute, pure calm of the analyst who has run the numbers, checked the data, and is about to execute. The music swells. The doors at the back of the ballroom are opening. My heartbeat is perfectly in time with the music. The ceremony is beginning. From the soundproof booth, the grand ballroom is a diorama of my family's ambition. Down below, the string quartet swells, and the heavy oak doors swing open. A spotlight, a warm, forgiving gold, finds Sienna. She is a masterpiece of their design. The white gown, the veil, the shimmer of borrowed pearls. She is every dream they ever had. packaged for acquisition. She begins her walk down the long, white aisle, a river of satin. Her eyes are bright, scanning the pews. I see her gaze sweep the front row, then the second, then the third, a tiny, almost imperceptible flicker of a frown. She's looking for me. She's looking for the one face that isn't smiling, the one person who isn't part of the performance. She doesn't find me. She turns her eyes forward, to Graham, and the perfect bridal smile snaps back into place. She reaches the altar. Graham, slick and confident in his custom tuxedo, takes her hand. He is an actor at the top of his game. He turns, partially to her, partially to the 200 guests, and mostly to the videographer's camera. He begins his vows, his voice rich and deep, resonating with a practiced sincerity. A partnership built on trust, honesty, and a shared vision. I watch him, my hand resting on the cool steel of the door handle to the service corridor. Milo, my technician, has his finger on a single key. His headset is patched into the main audio, including the feed from the lavalier microphone hidden in Sienna's bouquet. Graham continues, his eyes locked on Sienna's. I promise to be your rock, your confidant, in sickness and in health. Sienna, trembling slightly, lowers her bouquet, holding it near her waist. She's standing just feet from the front pew, feet from our parents. Graham takes a breath, smiling for the camera. I promise to love and honor you, for richer. At that exact moment, a new sound enters Milo's audio feed. It's not Graham. It's a sharp, sibilant whisper, caught with perfect clarity by the microphone buried in the silk peonies. It's our father, leaning sideways to our mother, his voice tight with a desperate, relieved greed. Once this is settled, he whispers, the words feeding directly into our system. The debt is clear, we're clear. Graham, oblivious, beams at his bride. For poorer. Now, I say. Milo hits the key. It is not a gradual change, it is an execution. The string quartet's hopeful melody doesn't fade. It is guillotined. A sudden, violent click, and the ballroom is plunged into a silence so deep it has a physical weight. Every head snaps up. The 20-foot LED screen behind the altar, which had been displaying a soft focus image of ivory roses, flickers to absolute black. Graham freezes, his mouth half open. A single second of total confusion passes. Then the screen flashes on. It is not a slideshow of childhood memories. It is a stark, black and white flowchart, the kind I use in compliance reports. 3 boxes at the top. Apex Logistics, Keystone Sourcing, Meridian Global. 3 red arrows point downward, converging on a single, larger box. Westvale Outreach Foundation, and beside it, in a font the size of a man's head, a glowing crimson number, $4,800,000. A collective, sucking gasp pulls the air from the room. What the hell? A man in the front row, a board member, murmurs. Before Graham can react, the slide advances. Thwack! On the left, a high-resolution scan of the $145,000 invoice from DeGroote's Jewelers for 1 cushion-cut diamond ring. On the right, a scanned check from the Westvale Outreach Foundation, paying that exact amount, and zoomed in, highlighted in a shaking red circle, is the signature on the authorization line. Robert Whitlow, my father's signature. I watch my father's face, even from this distance. He looks like he's been shot. He lurches halfway out of his pew, his hand grabbing his chest, before my mother yanks him back down, her face a mask of furious, bone-white denial. Graham spins around. His smile is gone, replaced by a twitching, uncomprehending snarl. "Shut it off," he hisses. "Shut that off." Thwack, the slide advances again. It's the email, my email, his email. Subject, recommendation, T. Whitlow. His digital signature, his name, his title, CFO, ArcLight Meridian Holdings, and below it, the core text of the NDA he and my mother had tried to force on me. The two images are side by side, and in huge, bold letters. My own annotation connects them. A recommendation letter, in exchange for permanent silence. The room is dead. The silence is no longer confused. It is absolute. It is the silence of a tomb. The music is gone. The vows are gone. There is only the low, humming whine of the projector fans. A side door, near the altar, clicks open. I step out from the shadows of the service wing. I am not wearing a chiffon bridesmaid's dress. I am wearing my black power suit, my boots echoing on the marble floor. I am a void, a block of shadow in their white and gold fantasy. Every single person in the room turns to look at me. The board members, the executives, my parents, Graham, and finally, Sienna. She turns. Her back was to the screen. She sees my father's ashen face. She sees Graham, frozen in a rictus of pure, exposed guilt. And she sees me, standing there, holding nothing, watching her. Her eyes, wide with a horror that hasn't yet processed into thought, flick down to the bouquet in her hands, the microphone, the perfect echo of her wedding. The bouquet slips from her fingers. It falls to the marble floor. Thud. The sound, amplified by the still live microphone, is the only sound in the world. It is the sound of a closing casket. It is the sound of the end. A wedding coordinator in the back corner is frantically jabbing at her touchscreen console. Her face panicked. "I'm locked out!" She's screaming into her headset. "I can't override it. It's not our system." She's right. It's not. The file is playing on a loop from Milo's server. Hard-patched, and he is already packing his Pelican case in the locked AV booth. The file starts over. Thwack, the flowchart. 4,800,000 $. I take a step forward, into the golden spotlight that was meant for my sister. I picked up the heavy silver lectern microphone, the one meant for heartfelt toasts. The click as I switched it on was a gunshot in the silent room. Every eye, 200 of them, snapped from Sienna, from Graham, from the screen, and locked onto me. My name is Tessa Whitlow. My voice was not my own. It was amplified, metallic, stripped of all emotion. It was the voice of an audit report. I am a senior compliance analyst for ArcLight Meridian Holdings, and I am the bride's sister. Each fact was a hammer blow. Compliance, ArcLight, sister. The three words connected everything. As if summoned by the words, the grand double doors at the back of the ballroom burst open, not with a crash, but with a smooth, decisive push. Two men and a woman in dark, impeccably tailored suits stepped inside. They did not look like wedding guests. They looked like the future. They moved with a calm, institutional authority, flanked by hotel security. The lead man, his face impassive, spoke, his voice cutting through the stunned silence without effort. "Graham Lockhart?" Graham didn't, or couldn't, answer. He just stared, his face a grotesque mask of confusion and terror. "We are representatives from the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, Division of Enforcement," the man continued, holding up a small leather badge holder. "We have received a formal whistleblower complaint, TCR 10-249583. We are serving a data preservation order for all ArcLight Meridian servers and a temporary freeze on the assets of the Westvale Outreach Foundation, pending investigation." A new figure appeared in the doorway, stepping out from behind the SEC agents. It was Mark Theron, the head of audit. His face was grim, his eyes burning with a cold, righteous anger. He ignored Graham completely. His gaze swept the front row, landing on the CEO and the other board members, who were half risen from their seats. "Mr. Mannheim," Theron said, his voice a low growl of command. "Pursuant to my conversation with the SEC this morning, and the evidence provided, an internal investigation is now officially open. Graham Lockhart's system access has been revoked. He is, as of this moment, on administrative leave." Graham took an involuntary step backward. He looked wildly around, his eyes finding a man in the third row, his personal lawyer, a guest. The lawyer stood up, smoothing his tuxedo, but he was frozen, as useless as a statue. He couldn't object. This wasn't a courtroom. This was an execution. The presentation on the giant screen, the one Milo had set on a relentless loop, clicked forward. Thwack, the flowchart, the red arrows, the $4,800,000 cowjoys. Thwack, the $145,000 ring, my father's signature. Thwack, a new slide, the one I had built to be the most damning. A direct, side-by-side comparison. Column A, ArcLight Legacy Supplier, price per unit, $1,200. Column B, Apex Logistics, price per unit, $155,500. Delta, Plawan $400,000. Override authorization, G. Lockhart, CFO, and below it, 2 more columns for Keystone and Meridian, showing the rest of the $4.8 million, highlighted in a pulsing, angry red, was a single line item, foundation gifts, transferred to Westvale Outreach, $750,000. My parents crumpled. They didn't just bow their heads, they physically collapsed. My father, a broken, gray man, covered his face with both hands, his shoulders shaking in silent, racking sobs. My mother was worse. She was rigid, her spine locked, her hands clenched in her lap, but her face was vacant. The mask of the suburban matriarch had not just slipped, it had been incinerated, leaving nothing behind. From the altar, a small, broken sound, a whisper. "Sis." Sienna. She was looking at me, her face a wasteland of shock, the veil a cruel mockery. She was the only one I looked at. I raised the microphone, my grip tight, my knuckles white. My voice was no longer the analyst's. It was the sisters. It was cold. It was final. And it was the truth. "He bought your ring with stolen money." "Sienna," I said into the microphone. My voice echoed off the crystal chandeliers. "He bought this party. He bought this wedding with stolen money. He bought our parents' silence with it." Crash. Somewhere in the back, a guest dropped a champagne flute. The sound of it shattering on the marble floor broke the spell. The murmur started, a low, horrified hiss. It wasn't just whispers. It was the sound of reputations evaporating, the sound of 200 people realizing they were witnesses, not guests, that they were complicit in a fraud by their very presence. "My God," someone said. "It's the board. Get us out of here, now." Guests began to stand, not in a panic, but with a cold, desperate urgency. A man in the second row, a managing director at a partner firm, grabbed his wife's arm and pulled her toward the aisle, his face pale. They were rats, and the ship was not just sinking, it was a crime scene. "Enough!" The voice was a roar. It was Mannheim, the CEO. He was on his feet, his face a deep, apoplectic purple. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the wreckage of his company's reputation. "This is not a sideshow," he bellowed, pointing a thick finger at his executives. "The Bordeaux room, all board members, now." He turned to the SEC agents. "You two, with us." He turned to Mark Theron. "Mark, bring your evidence." His eyes finally landed on Graham, who was standing, limp and gray, under the spotlight. "You," Mannheim spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "You are finished. Don't you dare move." The ballroom doors were wide open now, a gaping wound. Guests were flooding out into the lobby. A black tie stampede, the wedding coordinator, who had been frantically trying to regain control of the AV system, finally managed to do something. In her panic, trying to cut the feed from Milo's server, she accidentally patched the main screen to the videographer's live camera. The loop of evidence vanished. It was replaced by a 20-foot-tall, high-definition, brutally lit close-up of Graham Lockhart's face. His mouth was open, his eyes were wide and blank. A single bead of sweat was rolling down his temple, catching the light. It was the face of a man who had just lost everything: his power, his money, his future, his bride, all of it, gone, in the space of 3 minutes. The screen froze on that image, a perfect digital monument to his ruin. The Bordeaux room at the Piermont is separated from the grand ballroom by a set of 12-foot, soundproofed mahogany doors. It is the hotel's inner sanctum, reserved for high-stakes negotiations and private dinners. Now, it was a makeshift war room. The contrast was staggering. I had just walked out of a hurricane of noise, guests fleeing, Sienna sobbing on the altar, the frozen, 20-foot-tall image of Graham's face. I stepped through the doors, and a wall of absolute, tomb-like silence hit me. The room smelled of old leather, expensive carpet, and the sharp, ozone tang of a freshly run laser printer. They were all there, the 7 voting members of the ArcLight board, arranged around a massive, polished table that reflected their faces like a dark pool. Mannheim, the CEO, was at the head, his face still a dangerous shade of purple. The 2 SEC agents stood against the wall, observing, their presence a quiet, lethal threat. Graham was there, slumped in a leather chair by the door, a hotel security guard standing behind him. He looked like a man who had aged 30 years in 10 minutes. His lawyer was next to him, shuffling papers, looking utterly useless. And at the far end of the room, standing by a projector, was Mark Theron. He had not been idle. Stacks of paper, stapled into neat sets, were placed at every board member's seat. Mannheim gestured for me to enter, his movement sharp and angry. "Ms. Whitlow, sit." I didn't sit. I walked to the side of the room. Standing near the SEC agents, I was a witness, not a participant. "Let's get this over with," Mannheim growled, slamming a heavy hand on the table. "Mark, report." Mark Theron nodded. He was in his element. This was not a wedding. It was a debrief. His voice was a cold, passionless monotone. "You all have the summary," he began, clicking a remote. The projector flared to life, not with flowcharts, but with dry, damning spreadsheets. At 4 p.m. on Wednesday, Ms. Whitlow attempted to present this to me. Her meeting was intercepted by Mr. Lockhart. At 4:30 p.m., she filed Form TCR with the SEC this morning, presented with her filing number. I unsealed my own parallel investigation, which her data corroborates entirely. He clicked a new slide. "The problem is simple. 3 vendors, Apex, Keystone, Meridian, all shell corporations registered in Delaware, all approved by Mr. Lockhart, using his CFO override to bypass compliance checks, all billing, as you've seen, at a 38.5% markup. Total loss to ArcLight, $4.8 million, siphoned over 18 months. "This is a lie," Graham suddenly shouted, lurching forward. The security guard put a hand on his shoulder, and he fell back into the chair. "It's a personal attack. She's vindictive. She's my fiancé's sister. This is a family dispute she's dragged into the boardroom." His lawyer chimed in, his voice thin. "My client is asserting this is a malicious and defamatory action stemming from a personal grievance." Theron didn't even look at him. He clicked to the next slide. It was the digital log. "This is not a personal dispute, Mr. Lockhart. This is the server log showing your unique digital key authorizing the wire transfer to Apex at 2:14 a.m. on a Sunday. This," he clicked again, "is the log of you accessing Ms. Whitlow's risk analysis model from your home IP address, 2 days before you presented it as your own. And this," he clicked one last time, "is the digitally signed email you sent Ms. Whitlow this morning, offering a recommendation letter in what can only be construed as a quid pro quo for her silence on a federal crime. Your signature is on the fraud. Your signature is on the theft. Your signature is on the cover-up." Graham's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. "Where is Pace?" Mannheim barked, looking around the room. As if on cue, the door opened, and Richard Pace, the VP of Procurement, stumbled in, his face slick with sweat. "Mr. Mannheim, I just heard." I swear, I had no idea. Graham. He told me it was a preferred partner program, a new paradigm. I just signed what I was told to sign. Mannheim cut him off with a slice of his hand. You signed fraudulent contracts. Richard, you cost us millions. But I didn't know, Pace pleaded, his voice cracking. Then you're incompetent, Mannheim snarled. And I don't pay for incompetent. You're suspended, effective immediately. Get him out. No, please, Pace begged, as the second security guard took his arm. Suspended, Mannheim roared. Pace was hauled out of the room, his pleas cut off by the heavy thud of the door. The board members didn't even flinch. They were surgeons cutting away a diseased limb. Mannheim turned his attention back to Graham. The evidence is absolute. I am calling for a vote, all in favor of the immediate and indefinite suspension of Graham Lockhart, pending the results of a full criminal and internal investigation. Every hand went up, instantly. No, not every hand. One man, a board member named Silas Croft, a known crony of Graham's, kept his hand down, staring at the table. 6-1, Mannheim said. The motion passes. He suspended. He looked at Croft. Your nay is noted. Silas, we'll be reviewing your position on the compensation committee tomorrow. Croft visibly paled. Mannheim continued. A machine of damage control. Motion 2. An immediate freeze on all contracts and payments to Apex Logistics, Keystone Sourcing, and Meridian Global, all in favor. This time, all 7 hands went up. Unanimous. Mannheim looked at Theron. Mark, you're in charge of the internal investigation. You have a blank check. Burn it all down. I will, Theron said. Mannheim then looked at me. His eyes were cold, assessing. He was no longer angry. He was calculating. Ms. Whitlow. I stepped forward. I placed a thin file folder on the polished table. It slid to a stop in front of him. My part in this is done, I said. That folder contains 2 items. First, the official time-stamped receipt from the SEC's whistleblower portal. You'll note it was filed 48 hours before this meeting, which protects me, and this company, from any accusation of retaliation. I paused. Second, I said, my voice dropping, is a list. You've dealt with Mr. Lockhart and Mr. Pace, but this was not a 2-man operation. That list contains the names of the board members of the Westvale Outreach Foundation. I saw him flinch. He didn't know about my parents. I had saved that for this moment. It also includes the 2 junior analysts in accounting who were processing the payments, and the admin in your own office who was scheduling the vendor meetings off the official books. I had given them the whole network. The board members stared at the folder as if it were a bomb. Mannheim nodded slowly. Your thoroughness is noted. A man at the end of the table, the corporate counsel, cleared his throat. Mr. Chairman, with Mr. Lockhart's suspension, his seat on this board is temporarily vacant. We cannot have a vacuum in financial oversight, especially not now. I agree, Mannheim said. I move to grant Mark Theron temporary, acting appointment to the board as Chief Oversight Officer, effective immediately. All in favor, unanimous. Theron simply nodded, his face impassive. He had just become the most powerful man in the room. The corporate counsel now turned his attention to me. He slid a thick, cream-colored envelope across the table. It was not a wedding invitation. Ms. Whitlow, he said, his voice smooth. First, please accept this. It is a formal, binding order from the board, acknowledging your status as a protected whistleblower. You are fully indemnified, and your position at Arclight is secure. He paused, sliding a second, thinner envelope out. Furthermore, the board, in light of your exceptional diligence and the sudden vacancy in the compliance department, Theron is head of audit, I cut in. Not compliance. Correct, the lawyer said, not missing a beat. The current head of compliance, who approved Mr. Theron's initial resolved report on your complaint, tendered his resignation 10 minutes ago. Of course he did. The board, the lawyer continued, is formally offering you the role of interim head of compliance for Arclight Meridian Holdings. You will report directly to Mr. Theron and this board. You will have full authority and the requisite budget to clean house. The room was silent. They were all looking at me, the SEC agents, the board, Mannheim, Theron, Graham, who was now just a ghost in the corner. This was the moment. This was the prize. This was the vindication. They had buried me in the basement, and now they were offering me the key to the 39th floor. I looked at the envelope. I looked at their faces. Hard, pragmatic, desperate faces. They weren't rewarding me. They were trying to contain me. They were turning the weapon that had just destroyed them into their new shield. I didn't touch the envelope. I just said 2 words. I decline. Mannheim's head snapped up. What? I decline, I repeated. My voice was calm and clear. It echoed slightly in the quiet, leather-bound room. I don't understand, the lawyer said, baffled. This is a significant promotion. Ms. Whitlow, you would be in charge. I know what it is, I said. My report is filed. The SEC has the data. Mr. Theron has the rest. My job here is finished. I turned to leave. Tessa, wait, Theron said. It was the first time he'd used my first name. His voice wasn't a command. It was almost a plea. I stopped at the heavy door, my hand on the brass handle. Why? Mannheim demanded, his voice low and dangerous. We're giving you what you want. We're giving you the power to fix this. I turned back to face them, all of them, the circle of powerful men who had let a wolf into their house because he was making them rich. I'm not staying to clean up a mess you all allowed to fester, I said, my voice as cold as the glass on the 39th floor. My first report on these vendors was 6 months ago. It was buried because it was ruining the atmosphere. You didn't want compliance. You wanted silence. You didn't want the truth. You just got caught. I looked past Mannheim, past Theron, to the ghost in the chair. You all built this. You can clean it up. I opened the door and walked out, leaving them to the silence and the smell of fresh ink on their worthless paper. I walked out of the Bordeaux room, leaving the board to their frantic triage. The heavy mahogany door clicked shut behind me, and the sound of my own footsteps on the thick carpet of the corridor was suddenly, deafeningly loud. I was walking from one tomb into another. The grand ballroom was no longer a celebration. It was a ruin. The bright, golden lights were still shining, illuminating the disaster with a cruel, theatrical clarity. Most of the guests were gone, having fled as if from a plague. The ones who remained were huddled in small, dark clusters, whispering, their faces pale. They were the witnesses, the ones who would tell this story for years. The air, which hours ago had been electric with perfume and champagne, was now stale. It smelled of cold food, spilled wine, and the heavy funereal scent of lilies from the toppled centerpieces. On the white marble aisle, petals were scattered, crushed into the floor like patches of dirty, melting snow. My eyes found the altar. The 20-foot screen was black, a dead monolith. Graham was gone, no longer a frozen image, but physically removed, likely detained by the board in the room I had just left. And Sienna was still there. She was standing alone, a solitary figure in her vast white gown, a ghost haunting the scene of her own execution. No music, no groom, no family rushing to comfort her. She was an object left behind, a beautiful, expensive thing now rendered worthless. She was just staring at the empty space where Graham had been. I started to walk toward the exit, my path taking me along the edge of the room. I saw my parents. They were near the front pew, an isolated island of disgrace. My father was sitting, his body collapsed in on itself, his tuxedo jacket rumpled, his head buried in his hands. My mother was standing beside him. She was not crying. She was rigid, her spine locked, her hands clenched at her sides, her face a blank, white mask of pure distilled rage. As I moved, her head snapped up. Her eyes found me. They were dead. They were pits of ash. She saw the architect of her ruin. She took a single, violent step toward me, her hand half raised, her mouth opening to scream, or curse, or beg. But she stopped. She froze. Her gaze had darted past me, to her husband, to the man standing beside him. One of the SEC agents. He was not touching my father. He was not arresting him. He was just talking. His voice was a low, patient murmur, his notepad out. He was calmly, professionally explaining the legal ramifications of the asset freeze on the Westvale Outreach Foundation. My mother's hand fell to her side. The authority, the maternal power, the suburban tyranny. It all evaporated. She understood. She was no longer a matriarch. She was a witness. She was a co-conspirator. And in the face of federal authority, her anger was meaningless. She slowly turned away from me, back to her broken husband, a silent, total surrender. I continued my walk. I had one last piece of business, near the back wall, by the AV booth. A man in a black polo shirt was efficiently packing a large, rolling pelican case, Milo. He didn't look up as I approached, but he knew I was there. I stopped, and he methodically coiled a thick black cable. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the lectern microphone, the one I had taken from the altar. "You left this," I said. He took it from my hand, his expression neutral. He didn't smile. He was a professional. "No," he said, his voice low. "I think you're finished with it." He dropped it into a foam-lined slot in the case. "Thank you, Milo," I said. He nodded, not meeting my eye. He zipped the case lining and snapped the heavy latches shut. The file played as specified. "Ms. Whitlow, my contract is complete." He hoisted the heavy case, his gig over, and walked away through the service exit, disappearing as cleanly as he had arrived. And then, there was only one thing left. I turned. The ballroom was vast. Sienna was all the way at the other end. On the raised dais, a bride stranded on a mountain. I had to walk the aisle. I walked down the center of the white runner, now stained and scuffed, past the empty rows of chairs, past the abandoned programs, past the wreckage of her perfect day. Every step was heavy. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a cold, hollow certainty. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel powerful. I just felt correct. I reached the steps to the altar. I stopped. She finally turned, her gaze moving from the empty space to me. Her face was a smear of tears and makeup. The veil was tangled. Her eyes were red, swollen, but she was past the point of sobs. She was just hollowed out. We stood there, face to face, the silence of the room stretching between us, the shadow and the spotlight, the analyst and the asset. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was a dry, broken whisper. "What did you want, Tessa?" It was not why, it was what. A question of motive, a question of price. She still saw the world as a transaction. She thought I had done this to get something. I looked at her, at the sister I had loved, the sister who had been so easy to love because she demanded nothing but adoration. "I wanted you," I said, my voice quiet, just for her. To not use the Whitlow name like a moral discount card. The line hit her harder than the entire video presentation. Her face, which had been a mask of shock, crumpled. This, finally, was the blow that landed. A deep, agonizing sob was torn from her chest. "I didn't know," she wailed. The classic, final defense of the willfully ignorant. "I didn't know about the vendors. I didn't know about the money. I loved him." "I know," I said, and I did. I believed her. She hadn't known the specifics. She had just chosen not to ask. She had chosen not to see. She had accepted the ring, the party, the cars, the life, and she had never once questioned the cost. "It doesn't matter," I said, my voice as cold and hard as the marble floor. "Whether you knew or not, you still have to choose. You have to choose now." "Choose what?" she whispered, the tears turning hot and angry. "You've left me nothing. You destroyed everything. You destroyed me. I left you the truth, I said. It's the only thing in this entire room that was real. You have to choose whether you'll stand by him and the lie, or if you'll finally stand by yourself. She just stared at me, her mind shattering against the binary, unable to compute it. She was looking for a way to make me the villain, to make her the victim, to escape the burden of the choice. I was finished. I had given her the data. My report was complete. I turned my back on her. I walked away from the altar, down the steps, and toward the grand entrance. I passed the guest book table. It was a still life of the disaster, abandoned champagne flutes, a small, perfect, untouched 3-tiered cake, and her bouquet, the one she had dropped. The silk peonies were crushed, smeared with her mascara from where she must have held it to her face. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the ivory invitation card, the one my mother had handed me. My verdict, I looked at it, the silver calligraphy, Mr. and Mrs. Robert Whitlow requests the honor of your presence. I placed it face down on the table. A final, returned RSVP. It landed on a small, wet ring left by a champagne flute, the ink starting to blur. I turned my back on the room, on my parents, on my sister, on Arclight. I walked, not to a side exit, but straight out the main doors, the ones Sienna had walked in as a bride. I pushed them open. No one stopped me. No one called my name. I stepped out onto the terrace. The Westvale night air hit my face. It was cold and sharp and real. It smelled like the distant promise of rain. It was the first clean breath I had taken in a year. A hard gust of wind, a real, physical force, swept across the portico. It caught the enormous vinyl backdrop that had been set up for the perfect wedding photos. The banner strained against its cheap aluminum frame. I heard a sound, a sharp rip, and then a snap of a retaining clip. The wind twisted the banner, pulling one corner free. The words happily ever after were torn, flapping violently, crooked, revealing the dark, empty framework behind them. I stood on the terrace, alone. The cold night air was a physical slap, shocking my skin, clearing my lungs. The frantic energy of the ballroom, the whispers, the sobbing, the running feet, all of it faded into a dull, distant roar behind the thick hotel glass. Out here, there was only the sound of the wind and the city. A hard gust swept across the portico, catching the massive 10-foot-tall vinyl backdrop set up for the wedding photos. It strained against its cheap aluminum frame. I heard a sharp, tearing sound, a plastic clip snapping, the banner, with its perfect, silver-scripted happily ever after, ripped from its top corner. It flapped, half-torn, a broken wing, revealing the dark, empty scaffolding that held the lie in place. It was the perfect, final image. I pulled my phone from my pocket. The screen was blindingly bright in the darkness. My fingers were perfectly steady. I opened the encrypted messaging app. One contact, Mark Theron. My message was short. It was final. Handover file is in the secure folder. I hit send. 2 gray check marks immediately turned blue. Read. That was the file I hadn't given the board. That was the other set of books, the one that went beyond the Westvale Foundation. It contained my research into the 2 offshore accounts in the Caymans I suspected Graham had opened, the ones I couldn't yet prove, but that Theron, with the power of the board and the SEC, now could. It contained the server logs of the 2 junior analysts in accounting who had been running the numbers, and the phone records of the admin in Mannheim's own office, who had been scheduling the vendor meetings off the official calendar. I hadn't stayed to clean up their mess, but I had left them the map to the rest of the rot. My thumb moved to power down the phone, to sever the last tie, but before I could, the screen lit up with a vibration, a notification I had set for myself, an automated alert from a secure server. Subject: Dead Man's Switch. Confirmation of send. Email to redacted PR firm. Redacted Financial Newswire. Status: sent, 7:06 p.m. The 5-minute window had passed. While I was in the Bordeaux room, while I was refusing their offer, While I was giving Sienna her final choice, the clock had been ticking, my dead man's switch. I had set it to go live at 7:05 p.m., 5 minutes after the vows were scheduled to start. Unless I manually intervened. I had not intervened. The SEC filing was the scalpel, precise, internal, and legal. This email was the bomb. It contained everything: the flowcharts, the scans of the checks, the photo of the jeweler's receipt, the side-by-side comparison of the NDA and Graham's email. It was the entire story, packaged not for lawyers, but for the public. By morning, it would be on every financial news network. By the time the market opened on Monday, Arclight and Whitlow would be toxic assets. This was not just about compliance. This was about consequences. This was the part of the truth they couldn't control, couldn't spin, couldn't reassign to an interim committee. This was the part that would burn the whole rotten structure to the ground. I looked at the sent confirmation. There was no joy. There was no victory. There was just the cold, clean, quiet satisfaction of an equation being solved, of a line item being zeroed out. I held the power button down. The screen flickered and died. The last connection was cut. I walked down the wide, curving marble steps of the Piermont Plaza, away from the terrace, away from the ballroom's muffled chaos. The sounds of the city grew louder, a rush of life that had been happening all along, indifferent to the drama inside. A siren wailed in the distance. Traffic hissed on the wet pavement. My hand brushed the inside pocket of my suit. The paper, the NDA, the document that had been my mother's ultimatum. Graham's weapon, the price of my silence. $60,000 to disappear. I pulled it out, the folded white pages, held by a single, shiny staple. It felt thin and cheap. I saw a trash receptacle on the curb, a heavy, ornate, cast-iron bin, painted black, trying to make garbage look civilized. I walked over to it. I stood before it for a moment. I didn't crumple the paper. I didn't tear it into pieces. I just opened my hand. I let it fall. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. It just dropped into the darkness. I heard it hit the bottom of the metal liner. A dry, thin, papery thwack. The sound of a file being closed. The sound of a debt being settled. I stepped off the curb. My black boots hit the asphalt. I raised my hand. A yellow taxi, its for-hire light a halo in the light mist, cut across 2 lanes of traffic and screeched to a halt in front of me. The back window slid down. The driver, a man with a tired face and a baseball cap, looked at me. "Where to?" I pulled the door open and slid onto the cracked vinyl seat. The car smelled of stale coffee and cinnamon air freshener. It was the most real, honest scent I had encountered all day. "Where to, lady?" he asked again, his eyes on me in the rearview mirror. It was the first question of a life I hadn't planned for. I had no destination. I had no home. Westvale was a crime scene. My apartment was an evidence locker. I looked at the back of his headrest, at the blur of the city lights passing by the window. "Just drive," I said. He sighed. "Gotta give me something. North? South? Downtown?" I leaned my head back against the seat. The vinyl was cool against my skin. I looked at his eyes in the mirror. "Anywhere," I said, my voice quiet, but clear. "Anywhere without fake mirrors." He held my gaze for a second, his expression unreadable. He'd seen it all. Drunk bridesmaids, jilted lovers, corporate walk of shames. He probably put me in all 3 categories. He shrugged. "Your dime?" he said. He slammed the gear into drive and hit the gas. The taxi lurched away from the curb, merging into the flow of the city. I didn't mean to look back. It wasn't a choice. It was a reflex. The need to see the body one last time. Through the rain-streaked rear window, the Piermont Plaza shrank. It was just another monolith of glass and ambition. The grand, elegant, cursive sign on its facade glowed against the dark sky. But one of the letters, the P, had a short, it was flickering, on, off, on, off. It was a stutter. It was a glitch in the system. It was a slow, conspiratorial wink, as if the building itself was acknowledging the lie. A silent partner to the thousands of false vows and dirty deals that had happened inside its walls. The stage for their perfect future was now a tombstone. The taxi turned a corner. The building vanished. I faced forward. I looked through the front windshield as the wipers pushed the city lights across the glass. Red, green, yellow, stop, go, caution. My entire life had been a state of permanent, anxious caution. A weight I had not realized I was carrying. A heavy, pressurized stone that had been sitting on my chest for months. Simply dissolved. I took a breath. It was not a gasp. It was not a sob. It was just a breath. Air. Entering my lungs. Simple. Biological. I exhaled. Long and slow. The tension unspooled from my shoulders, from my jaw, from the muscles in my back that had been clenched into armor. I had been holding that one single breath since the moment my mother placed that ivory invitation in my hand. My family told me, if you really love your sister, you'll disappear. A problem, a complication, a stain to be hidden away. They wanted a ghost, an empty chair, an absence. They wanted me to vanish so their beautiful, hollow lie could become real. I didn't disappear. I watched. I recorded. I analyzed. I became the fact they could not delete. I became the mirror they were terrified to look into. And tonight, I forced them to see their own reflection. I didn't disappear. They did. Graham disappeared into the custody of his board and the SEC. My father disappeared into a fog of public shame and federal investigation. My mother disappeared behind the vacant mask of her own shattered ambition. And Sienna disappeared into the ruins of a life that was never hers, a fantasy built on stolen money. They are the ghosts now, haunting the empty ballroom, haunting the headlines, haunting the cold, dark, over-leveraged house in Westvale. I am the one who remains. Thank you for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please comment below with your city or country so we can all connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and give us an extra boost by hitting the hype button. It helps this story get heard by so many more people.